This is Taking Stock. I'm Bruce Whitfield. Khanyisile Kweyama is the chair of Brand South Africa. Brand South Africa, the flag bearer, if you like, for South Africa at Davos 2019. They're kind of in charge of the overall delegation. The influence of Davos is significant. The world, the who's who goes there. Donald Trump was going and has pulled out. I think he's sending Stephen Mnuchin, his Treasury Secretary, there. It is a place to see and to be seen. Yeah. How do we exert influence? Or how are we influenced even in a place like Davos?
You know, South Africa has always put up some key events. A South Africa dinner which showcases South Africa not only in terms of its policies, in terms of its delegation and the ministers and who they stand for, obviously with the president being the keynote, but also just in terms of the up and coming. I think you've seen over the years that you start seeing entities such as the Black Business Council, a smaller black business emerging as opposed to only the large banks, the large mining industry. So that South Africa dinner is always a popular and always getting a request for people to attend. And then this year there's also the investment breakfast, which will invite a number of potential investors, but also spearheaded by South Africans. Because I always think that charity begins at home, that you must demonstrate that your own are willing to invest in you. But on a global perspective, yes, to be seen and be seen there as South African business, I think some of our institutions like the banks have shown themselves to be not only South African banks. Standard Bank on the continent, beyond, you know, with its partnerships, demonstrating that we are global players, because with this year's theme, there's a lot of the globalization coming out, and South Africa taking a very prominent position in leading that globalization drive throughout the continent.
This concept in South Africa that we are very familiar with and we talk about more and more, we don't know how to do it yet, but we talk about this idea of inclusive growth. Don't leave people on the periphery. Whether you've got GDP growth of 3 or 4 or 5%, if it's only benefiting the sort of the upper crust, it's not going to be very effective in terms of alleviating the worst of the poverty in the country and the worst of the inequality in the country. Davos, which used to, and is still massively elitist, but I think less elitist than it was in the past. At least the conversations are more inclusive than they used to be. Davos used to be about the creme de la creme and what they could get. It's a far more inclusive conversation that happens now. Winnie Bandenimina, for example, is very influential at Davos. The poverty conversation, the inequality conversation is happening more and more.
And you left out the global shapers, you know, where you're seeing the younger people, because it's all well and good for the old white men who have been dominating that space to be sitting there, and that by bringing in the global shapers and the younger groups that come in, it's demonstrating that recognition that the future is not us sitting around here, middle age and graying, but that the younger people are the future. And what are the ideas that they bring? I mean, there are awards that get showcased at Davos that are recognizing SMMEs, that are recognizing innovators. You know, young people who you just imagine, oh my God, I feel really old when I see these people. They're in their late 20s, they're in their early 30s, and they're having different conversations. They're taking us to a completely different level. So the elitism is moving a little away, but I think the world is the world, and it will always have those that are in that echelon. But for South Africa, it's a great opportunity to demonstrate that we are able to coexist. Remember how in 5 years, 10 years ago, the common criticism for South Africa was that two worlds, third world and first world. And I think we are demonstrating that those two worlds can actually start merging together to form a much bigger inclusive economy.
Why will anybody pay any attention to us at Davos? We make up less than 1% of global GDP. Yes, we're an influential African player, but Nigeria is huge, and Kenya, other than the events of this week, of course, with their terror attack, and Al-Shabaab is a growing and rapidly expanding economy. Ethiopia is doing amazing things. Rwanda is held up as this great example of an economy that the can-do attitude. In South Africa, I don't know if it's just because we're South African and we see the worst in ourselves, but what reason does the world have to pay us attention to?
You know, we still are a springboard into the continent, and the continent continues to be the largest, you know, in terms of growth in terms of young people. If you are looking for your business to grow into 20, 30 years, you need to catch the young people right now. And South Africa continues to be a great entry point. And South Africa has done some things around relaxing visa regulations to ensure that businesses...
Don't get me started on visa regulations, please.
This is not the topic today.
No, but I mean, the visa regulations have been singularly destructive.
Yeah, they have been.
The transformation of those visa regulations announced last year has not been properly implemented. It's still chaotic and it's still confusing. We do score a lot of own goals. Call it shooting ourselves in the foot.
But the policy is in place, and I think that's what we need to clean out to ensure that the systems and the delivery always supports the policies. And this is one of the criticisms that South Africa has always had. Greatest policy, but implementation not good.
Yeah.
And I think you've got a group within the delegation that have shown how some government and the private sector can work together to ensure that let the private sector be the implementer. The banks and the ID system where you can apply for IDs at the banks, that is a demonstration of how the PPP can work together to ensure that you make the policies, but let business implement. So that is still a vibrant conversation and a vibrant initiatives, the CEO initiative, unemployment, the YES program. So we have those pockets of successes that we need to showcase, that we need to say, in South Africa, you can have the ear, you can have the system in place, use us. And yes, we are competing with the Kenyas and the Nigerias and the Rwandas, and it's a call to us to speed up and make sure that we are strengthening our system so that when people decide who do I choose, mini, miny, mo, we are the ones that end up getting chosen.
There is a bit of a hubbub in the background, as there would be, because there's a lot of excitement around the South African delegation going to Davos in 2019. We may even have a couple of people coming into the room while we speak, but that's okay, simply because this is a live unfolding event this week here in Johannesburg as Team South Africa prepares to go to Davos 2019. Wrapping up this discussion in a moment.